Welcome to the Flight Club Podcast, a woman's guide to leaning out. We give you a behind-the-scenes look at business launch and growth through the stories of successful female entrepreneurs. Here's your host, Felina Hansen, founder and CEO of Hera Hub.
Hello and welcome. I'm excited to share my conversation today with Juju Hook. She is a brand strategist and business coach for midlife women and the author of Hot Flashes, Carpools, and Dirty Martinis, the quintessential guide for turning midlife into prime time. Her programs help women use the mastery they gained in the first half of their life to create businesses doing what they love with whom they love in the second half of their life. Juju's work focuses on the strategies and systems, as well as the confidence and courage required to build an impactful presence and earn reliable, sustainable income. Welcome to the show today, Juju.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm absolutely delighted to be here.
I'm excited to share your story. We've got, the path that many of us have taken, the whole corporate path on the entrepreneurship path. But before we get there, take us back. Tell us a little bit about you personally, and then we'll dive into your career path.
So I am an empty nester as of 2 days ago. Our one and only son just graduated and went off to his second semester of college. He had the first semester at the kitchen table, like so many kids did last year, I think. Married to the love of my life. We've been together for 22 years. We're madly in love, and I'm so excited. I think that may be my greatest accomplishment. And I am a writer at heart and by trade, and just a huge proponent of the power of midlife women. It's what I dedicate almost all of my energy and time to.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, we appreciate that. So let's go backwards a bit here. Tell us, where are you from? And, talk a little bit, college, decisions you made, early career path, all that good stuff.
Yeah, I grew up in Columbus, Ohio. I am Catholic school bred. I'm still recovering, but I did a full term when I was young, and then I ended up at the University of San Diego. My parents were divorced when I was very young, and so I lived with my mom and my 6 brothers in Ohio, and my dad always lived in San Diego, so I flew back and forth. It's where I spent all my vacations. So I ended up at college at USD, and I majored in creative writing. And straight out of college, I got my first marketing management job, which was sort of an accident. I actually applied at a temp agency right out of college to kind of make some money and find out what I liked. And I got a job in a marketing manager desk for a woman who had left and they hadn't replaced her. And over the course of like 6 weeks and then 8 weeks and then 12 weeks, they couldn't find a replacement. And I kept saying, give me the job, give me the job, give me the job. And I must have been just 21 at the time. And finally they relented and gave me the job. And so my first marketing job was a management job. I found myself very, very wrapped up and committed to the aspiration at that point. I was really ambitious around it. It was a whole lot of opportunity very early on, and I loved it and became a pretty quick study as far as strategy goes, and worked my way up, made it to the next institution. I worked in the financial industry, and I made it to the next institution, and I needed an MBA if I wanted to go further. So when I was in my late 20s, I went to San Diego State's executive MBA program, and I graduated from there in 1995 and entered into my first executive position. And I was an marketing executive in the financial industry for a number of years after that. And then I worked for Jacuzzi, and I ran Jacuzzi's hot tub brands worldwide. So started with their premium brand, which is called Sundance, and then their other brands, then their mass merchant brands. And I think we had 63 countries. I don't know how many dealers. We had hundreds of dealers, and ultimately left there because I got pregnant.
Mm.
And so when our son was very little, I opened my agency, and then I ran corporate brands from my own agency for about 14 years,
Wow.
and just made another switch just prior to 50.
Wow. Okay. Okay. So let's go back here a little bit. Super young, ambitious, really just making your way in the
Yeah.
corporate world, the
Yeah.
exciting world of credit unions.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then on to jacuzzis, which is I'm going to say a little more exciting than credit unions. No offense.
It was
credit unions.
definitely, there was definitely more leeway for fun. I can
Yeah.
tell you that I never fit in the financial industry. It was always a really rough spot for me. And I think that really formed a lot of the work that I do now, because I never really could operate from my essence. I always was covering something up, or, as a little bit of a loose cannon, right? So when you work in corporate, especially in the financial industry, you don't get to be a loose cannon, but if you're a consultant, you get paid extra if you're a loose cannon. So it took me a while to figure that out, but I always performed, but I never really fit in. And I think it took me a long time to recognize that it wasn't the fitting in that I was after. It was the being valued that I was after.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I want to pause on that topic here for a minute before we get into some of the work that you did as you launched your business, and then we'll get to your transition here shortly. But we did a survey at Hera Hub a few years ago of the reason folks had started their business, and what the kind of conventional wisdom is that women are seeking more work-life balance. And that's true, of course. A lot of times, you mentioned you left when you had your child, and the idea of going back to it's not even 9 to 5 anymore, right? It's like 8 to 6 sometimes, or whatever it is.
Yeah. But I don't have balance. I didn't get balance after that either. Running your own business doesn't take less time, right?
Yes. Yeah. But, you can control that time in different ways.
Correct. Yes.
And spread it out in different ways. What I thought was interesting, and maybe you can, give your perspective on this, your experience working with other women, is the number one reason women left their corporate job to start their business was because they didn't feel like their work at that company had the impact that they wanted it to make. They wanted to have more impact. They were frustrated with corporate politics or whatever it was that was limiting that impact. Was that the case for you? I know you said you kind of just felt like you didn't fit in, and have you heard that from other women you've worked with?
Yeah. I mean, that was definitely the case for me in the financial industry. I was just literally in the wrong spot. And so I was always busting at the seams. We should do this. We should do this. We should try this. We should, it just was, I always felt reined in. I always felt like I was inside a box. And beyond that, I think I really had a knack and a talent for developing relationships with creative talents, right? So I really understood the designers and the writers and the photographers and the videographers and production people and everybody that I was working with. And those relationships take a tremendous amount of finesse. And I just worked in a system where there wasn't any latitude for that. Everything was policed and everything was regimented. And like you said, tons of politics. And it really took away from the quality of everything that we did, not just what we produced, but the quality of the time that we spent together all day long. And I very often felt thwarted and just like a misfit. Jacuzzi was a different experience for me. Jacuzzi was an experience that was really vivid, really, really alive. I mean, we did all kinds of stuff at Jacuzzi, and there was international travel involved, and there were a lot of demands on me. But even there's something about working in corporate, something about working for someone else, especially I think when you get into upper management and C-suite levels, where you just you're required to take on the brand, and I was hard for me.
Yeah, absolutely. So you leapt off the cliff and started your own brand and started helping
I
companies.
did.
It looks like you worked from, solopreneurs to Fortune 500 companies. Talk a little bit about your agency and the work that you did, or still do, and then let's get into the book and this journey that you took.
Yeah, so I did agency work. I launched my agency in 2001 and I shut it down in 2015 and moved on to different things. I first ran a full agency with an office, we were all together. And then when the recession hit in 2008 and 2009 and so many people were sort of pivoting and working things out, I ended up attriting some employees and moving to a virtual agency model. Interesting enough, my husband and I own a car dealership, and the employees that I attrited now work for him. Some, however, 10 years later. So it's fascinating how all that works. My specialties were banking and automotive, which is what I came up in, and what my specialty is all the way around. Those are the two industries that I probably understand from a deepest standpoint in the industries I was raised in, and really. I focused on mid-sized companies with less than 500 employees, but I did have a lot of big companies where I worked with certain elements of their company. So AutoNation was a big client of mine. I worked for Infinity for a while. I did some work for Toshiba, where I could get into little specialized departments inside the company. So just experience on all different levels. And I loved it in terms of the work and the people that I worked with, but it wasn't terribly rewarding from a higher purpose standpoint. And I think at some point that kind of pulls on your heartstrings as you move forward in life.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we age, we mature, we look to experience new things. I can relate to that. I owned a marketing agency for 8 years prior to launching Hera Hub. And after a while, it was like, okay, I've been there for 500 marketing plans. What else can we do here?
Absolutely. And whose pockets am I stuffing dollars into as well? I think, one of the things that happened for me that I see happen for a lot of women is I got really efficient at what I did, and the goal initially was, well, gosh, can I create this? So, and develop my teams and do all this stuff so that I don't have to work as much. Mm-hmm. And then I got to the point where I didn't have to work as much and I was only running strategy and I had this amazing team and, we had great clients and I didn't really have a way to apply myself that was challenging in any way. I was kind of skating by. And it was funny because that's what I went for, right? Yeah. That was my goal. And when I hit it, I think that I started to have these feelings of, is this all there is? Is this, is this just going to be me helping these big corporations, stuff dollar bills in their pockets and for 3 hours a day? And what am I going to do with myself? So I think that's a pretty common story. I mean, I've talked to a lot of women who sort of get to a point and it's like, okay, it's time, time for a repurpose, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. We always, are challenging ourselves, hopefully learning, growing. And so let's get into some of the work you are doing currently. Some of the things that really spoke to me, as you talk about your path, and I think can relate to a lot of women, is the change in life, not only, going through menopause or, those types of things, but family, right? So you describe, going from over attached to a teen who no longer needed you. That's correct. A big transition for a lot of women because we all, in some way, shape, or form, wrap part of our identity up in being a mom, right?
Yeah.
And what does that mean when they don't need us anymore? So talk about that time and that transition, and then get into the work that you're helping other women do.
Yeah, so that was really interesting for me because I think part of the reason I got so overly involved in my son's life, and I was involved. I mean, I really was just way more involved than he needed me to be. So there was a rift between us because of it.
Were you a helicopter parent, Juju?
I was a snowplow parent.
Oh, okay.
Right. So it wasn't so much that I was controlling what he was doing as I was very invested in his results. And so I was kind of constantly in the mix, sort of helping him make way for things. right? Helping him. And, helping a kid doesn't help them at all. It's not helpful in the long run, especially not.
I want to pause on that though, but did you know that and recognize it at the time and you did?
No.
Okay, I see.
No, I didn't. I really felt like I was in it, and I really felt like it was my role to do it. I felt responsible to it. And I think too, we take into parenting, what we know from when we were kids, right? You only can work with what you have to work with. And so for me, this idea of really being present to my son and creating this tremendous, what I wanted was to create a tremendous amount of security in our house, right? Reliability in our house, because I didn't have that when I was young.
Yeah.
And so instead, what happened was I just created a situation where our son never had any hardship whatsoever, right? It was very difficult for him to develop any kind of resilience because I was sort of constantly making things easy. And I know he felt that. And initially my husband pointed it out to me a number of times, and I'm not really sure I could hear it from him, Yeah. And then I had a moment, I had a day in our house that was an absolute mess. And I woke up in the morning, there was a flood. I had been having some issues in my agency. I knew I was going to lose a big client the night before. I had kind of panicked, and I had a couple of martinis to sort of, bring things down a notch, right? Which is never a great idea. And I woke up in the morning, my head was pounding. It's put one of these San Diego rainstorms, right? That like falls in buckets. My in-laws were here from Germany. Oh. And I came down the stairs and just stepped into a puddle in my downstairs carpet. And it was like from that moment on, the whole morning just turned into this colossal mess. And my in-law, the gutters were full of rain and it was gushing in behind the dryer where the vent was. It was just a mess. And in the midst of the morning, I recognized that I hadn't woken Christian up, which is really ridiculous, right? I mean, here's a 13-year-old boy. I have no idea why I was waking him up. And when I did wake him up, it just turned into a fight, and he had an algebra test that day. He was furious at me that I had allowed him to oversleep, right? And it just escalated and escalated. He climbed out the window and out into a rainstorm. It was a mess. And I dropped him, loaded him into the car, and I dropped him off at school. And he went to a small school in Encinitas, and I loved the principal. And I was driving home from school, and I got a call from him, and he said, what's going on at your house, right? Like, Christian's here, he's wet. And he seems really upset. He seems like he's under a ton of pressure right now. And I just said, Stuart, he doesn't want to do what he's supposed to do. He doesn't want to do his homework. He's not engaged. And what happens if he just starts skating through life? And what happens if he's, just signs on to be mediocre and he never really cares about anything? And I kind of started to go off, and he interrupted me and said, listen, I wouldn't say this to every parent, but I feel like we have a relationship, and I don't think this is about him. I think this is about you. And it was a really startling moment for me. And it was like one of those moments where you have a new piece of information, and then all of a sudden you start reviewing everything that happened before that, right? Like the backwards slideshow, and everything takes on new meaning. And he said, I think that Christian doesn't need you in that way anymore. And I really want to encourage you to go do something that terrifies you. And so it was, really shortly thereafter, I would say within a week's time of that I decided I'm going to write a book. I'd always wanted to write a book. I'd made all of my money writing other people's words, loads and loads of money writing about individual retirement accounts and anti-lock brakes and, God knows what else. Right. And I just felt like I really have something to say now. And I was terrified that I was going to finally write my piece and people wouldn't like it, that I would be rejected. It felt bigger than anything I'd ever done. And I decided I wanted to get on a stage and start talking. And it just changed everything for me. From that moment on, everything changed. One by one, I sort of, sent my clients off to other places, and I walked away and started a whole new thing.
Well, exciting. I'm sure there was moments of like, what am I doing? But
I think more from my husband than from me.
well, it's tricky because we grow to a certain lifestyle, right? We get ourselves into house payments,
of
car
course,
payments,
right?
and all these things.
Yeah.
It's not easy to, kind of pull the brakes on all that. So,
Mm-hmm.
so I know in your book, Juju, you interviewed hundreds of middle-aged women. Again, the book is Hot Flashes, Carpools, and Dirty Martinis. Um, so talk a bit about that process and maybe give us, the top 2 to 3 things that you learned through that process of interviewing women.
So I started to talk to women right away once I started sort of the pivot, right? It was like, I think at first I just needed to know if I was being unreasonable. And, that, gosh, I've done all this stuff. I feel successful, right? I did what I set out to do, but I had all these things that I wanted to circle back on, right? Like these dreams from when I was young and in certain relationships and just things that felt like unfinished business. And at the same time, I had this fear that I wasn't relevant. Like, are people really going to listen to me? And, would this be better work for a younger woman? And just this sort of track that was playing over my head. And so I started to talk to women everywhere I went. I would sit down and have these conversations with women who were between 40 and 60. And what I realized was every single woman that I talked to had some form or another of the lie in her head that the older I get, the less I'm worth. So for some women, it was around what they looked like, right? Or the some degree of attractiveness or sexy. And for some women, it was like what I was feeling like, am I relevant? Do I know something that's expired? And I'm just not, I don't know how to do it anymore. For some women, it was around tech and this idea that, that I grew up in an analog world and everything's digital now and I can't keep up and I can't move fast enough. And for some women, it was around the parenting issue and that I've dedicated all my time and all my energy to my kids or to my relationships. And now I'm at the point where I have an opportunity to do something else and I'm afraid my ship has sailed. And so as I started talking to these women, I started to categorize the lies. And I wrote in the book 6 lies that we tell ourselves that sort of keep us stuck. They keep us from looking at midlife as what it really is, which is prime time, right? Like this is our 8 to 11 time slot. I mean, when you hit 45 or you're approaching 50, you're like really, it's prime. You know so much and you have this tremendous amount of mastery and you have different feelings about what you're willing to accept and what you're not. And you're locked into your values and you generally are multitasking, you're juggling. It's like a really powerful time for women. And at the same time, we're given all these messages about the fact that our value has been reduced. And it's very confusing for women. So I lined up the lies. I would say the biggest lie that I heard was I have extenuating circumstances. Right? It's easy for her and it's easy for her, but not me.
I'm
right?
different. My situation
I'm different. Yes, my situation's different. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Interesting. So, I'm kind of reflecting on this. I myself am 47. So kind of getting into this.
Yeah. That's how old I was when I left my agency. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And to your point, I mean, and I talk about this a lot and I have a lot of these discussions. Yeah, we live, as you said, in a very youth culture, youth driven, let's blame all the marketers, right? Like they're just trying to sell us more and more face cream all the time or Botox or whatever it is, right? Blame it on the media. So, I can certainly see where, and these conversations that I've had with women too, just, through Hera Hub and my own friends and things of that nature, this is a really, as you say, it's such a time of opportunity for women, but for so many are going through that empty nest, situation as well at the same time. And of course, we all know that we have this huge sandwich generation, right? As they call it, where oftentimes then we're also caring for our parents at the same time. And And we take on as women way more than we probably should, right? We say
Yep.
yes and we, want to please everybody and
Mhm.
all of that.
And find purpose in it, right? We
Yeah.
define ourselves by it.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. So you've done this research, you write the book, talk about getting the book out on the market, talk about speaking, and also talk about how that's changed, of course, with good old COVID over 2020. Some of the things that you're doing now, programs you've built or you're building, that type of thing.
So the book tour was interesting because I wrote the book. I opened my own publishing company. I did all kinds of research on whether or not I wanted to self-publish or whether I wanted to try to find a publisher. And ultimately, I wanted to move quickly, and I felt like I really had a market for the book. But I didn't want to self-publish because it's so hard to get in bookstores and libraries that way. So I had a friend help me. I opened my own publishing company, and I was ready to go on my book tour in the beginning of 2018. And my mom got cancer, and which is such a midlife woman experience, right? It's such a transition. And she lived in Yuma, Arizona. I brought her to our house to live. My husband and I lived apart for a while. It was a very merciful thing that he did. And he found a business in Arkansas that he could, contribute to. It was a really heart-wrenching time. And my mom moved in with me, and I wanted to spend as much time as I could with her. And so I didn't go on the book tour. And the book ended up selling anyway. And I think I measured my success by whether or not women would give it to each other, buy it for each other. And they did. And it started to spread around, and I started to speak from stage about prime time, and it just loved it. Like I was standing on stage, and I could just feel see the heads nod and watch women responding to it. And I had joined a speaker collective, like a speaker sisterhood with women who are trying to break into public speaking. And I had a coach say, you need to combine this with the branding. You need to combine this inspiration with the branding. And little by little, it just took on a life of its own. And I started helping women get to the core of who they really are and what their essence was made of, and in what ways were they influential, and how could they have the courage to show up, to build a presence. And then that really, the personal branding side really morphed into the business systems side. And now I work with women, and I help them develop personal brands to grow following and create businesses that have reliable, sustainable income, so we can get out of the feast or famine, and so that they can do things that they love. So they can take what you learned in the first half of life. Like I meet so many women who are like, man, I'm an amazing accountant and I'm over it. Right. I don't want to be an accountant anymore. Or, I have a client right now who's like a 4th degree black belt, and she's been teaching martial arts her whole life. And I don't want to do it anymore. Right. I'm done with this. And so the question becomes, how do we take the mastery and repurpose it so that you can create a second half of your life that you love, but you don't have to start over? And it's a really beautiful puzzle to work through with women. And, they come into their greatness, and they come into their power, and they along the way, they have to own all the things they're amazing at, and they have to own what their skills and talents are that they'll use to create the presence, right? To create their following, or to, open their pipeline, whatever. And it's just become, I can't imagine having a job that I like more than this. It's like talking to your friends on the phone all day. It's just amazing.
I love it. And you do group programs, one-on-one work.
I do one-on-one coaching. And I have a group called the Primetime Cut. It launches in April, and I work 10 months with women in an immersion program. So every woman has private coaching with me, and then they have a group experience together. And each month I take them through one aspect of business and marketing systems, business brand and marketing systems, so that they sort of build it all out from start to finish, from their, story all the way through to how do I close a sale and onboard people. And I love that. And then I run retreats throughout the events throughout the year. And this year in the summer, I'm going to launch a sort of a do-it-yourself course called Primetime Payday, where I'll go through all the stuff that we do together in the cut, but allow women to access it on their own.
Love it. Awesome. Well, it sounds like you have a busy year ahead, Juju. Lots cooking. That is awesome.
I'm excited.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything else in 2021 that you're working on that you'd want to share?
I have an event coming up in just a few weeks called Prosper, where I'm going to take women through a 3-day interactive experience online to determine sales worthiness. How do I create something that's sales worthy, and how do I get a paycheck every week at doing it, and how do I make change in the world? So each day will focus on sort of 1/3 of the puzzle.
Cool. Awesome. Well, thank you for being so impactful on the lives of so many women.
Oh my gosh, I love it.
Yeah, absolutely. Doing amazing work. We appreciate you at Hera Hub and your leadership and all the things that you contribute. If our listeners want to learn more about you, get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to do that, Juju?
Best way is at jujuhook.com. And there's always 3 tiles on the website that show what's going on, ways you can, work with me for free, ways you can, join my programs. And there's a button to book a discovery call for anybody who's interested in coaching or, needs a leg up. And I'm just absolutely committed to the women at Hera Hub. I love the environment. I love what it's all about, and happy to help anyone in any way I can.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time today. I really, really enjoyed our conversation.
Likewise. Thank you.
Thank you for joining this week's episode of Flight Club, sponsored by Hera Hub. We look forward to sharing more success stories with you soon.